Hi, everyone. If you can turn your cameras on as you start coming back so we can start with roll call and get going here as we are behind a few minutes. All right, it's 11:25. We are going to get started. Dr. Anderson. All right, hasn't joined us yet. Ms. Cohen. Ms. Corbett-Sanders.
Good morning.
Good morning. Ms. Dearnott-Koufax.
Good morning.
Mr. Frisch.
Hello.
Ms. Eismer-Heiser.
Hello, good morning.
Ms. Keys-Gamarra. Ms. Marin.
Hello.
Ms. McLaughlin.
Hello.
Ms. Omesh.
Here.
Ms. Tolan, I don't believe is here yet. Dr. Anderson.
Here.
I see you. Ms. Cohen. Ms. Keys-Gamarra.
Sorry, I'm here.
Oh.
Here.
Thanks. Ms. Keys-Gamarra. And okay. And I'm here, and let's get started on the portion, our beginning of our work session. We do have our pre-K and early early Head Start Parent Policy Committee 2020-21 annual report. I'm going to turn it over to you, Dr. Brabrand, to kick it off.
Thank you so much, Ms. Pekarsky. Members of the school board, good morning, and it's great to see everybody. And we're looking forward to lots of powerful presentations today. And we're going to kick it off with the pre-K and early Head Start Parent Policy Committee's annual report for the 2020-2021 school year. As you know, this is a superintendent advisory committee, and it is required to provide an annual report to the program's governing body, the school board. And we look forward to sharing this information with you, including asking for you to provide additional effort for supplemental funding around staffing projections, mental health program supports, age-accessible playgrounds, and transportation for kids living outside of a school's boundaries as we keep trying to strengthen our pre-K and early Head Start pipeline so that kids are ready when they enter the schoolhouse doors. So Dr. Presidio, I know you and your team are going to present the findings of this report, so I'll turn it over to you. Thanks.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Brabrand. And in the interest of time, I'm actually going to turn it over directly to Maura Burke, our Director of Early Childhood Education, as well as to Tanya Blackburn, our committee chair, who are going to guide the presentation to the board today.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having us here today. My name is Maura Burke. I'm the Director of Early Childhood, and I am just going to introduce Tanya Blackburn, who's going to walk you through the committee's annual report and share those highlights a little more in depth that Dr. Brabrand shared. So I'm going to now turn it over to Tanya Blackburn, our chairperson of the Parent Policy Committee.
Thank you so much, Maura. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay, great. Great. So good morning, ladies and gentlemen, members of the school board. My name is Tanya Blackburn, and I am the chairperson of the Parent Policy Committee of the FCPS Pre-K and Early Head Start. And I am delighted to be here virtually with you all to present an overview of the annual report. And I'd just like to take a moment to thank Maura Burke for her support and confidence in me to present today. So without further ado, if we could move on to the next slide. Thank you. So this on slide 2, we can see here how comprehensive the FCPS Pre-K and Early Head Start program is, because we can see it provides quality services, parent education, relationship building, medical and dental home services, early intervention, family engagement, multi-tiered systems of support, nutrition and life skills, trauma-informed support, quality instruction, and social emotional learning. And these different facets really just highlight how the program focuses on the whole child in a holistic way and in the context of their parents and the community. And if we just move on to the next slide, please. Thank you. We can see on this next slide the applications and enrollment information for the pre-K and Early Head Start program. And we can see here that we have had over 3,945 applications. And these include applications from non-eligible families where there was over-income or the students were too young or too old. But you can still see from the application numbers how there is a strong demand for the program. And we can also see that last year, there was a total of 1,863 slots for children in the pre-K and Early Head Start program. And as we can see, there has been a decline of 17% in the number of slots filled this year, which has only been 1,548 slots compared to the 1,848 that were available. And this decline is in large part due to the COVID pandemic, and it is similar across the Commonwealth. We can also see the number of children on the waiting list. Now, I do have an updated number, so it is actually 77 on the waiting list. And this is 7 are for Early Head Start and 70 are for students for pre-K. And the waiting list numbers oscillate between 11 and 16 for regions 1, 2, 4, and 5. Region 3 has 26 on the waiting list, and 10 of those are for Lawton Station. So we can see here, not including Lawton Station, there is roughly an even spread across the county. And to illustrate the point about waiting lists being very dependent on area and availability of slot centers, I'm just going to have a personal example. My youngest was put on the waiting list for the Early Head Start program at the beginning of January 2020. And as an FCPS representative to the Policy Council, I would see the monthly reports on the waiting list and also that there were also still Early Head Start slots available. But the pre-K and Early Head Start team at FCPS explained, although there are slots available, these are often at centers that are at different school pyramids or in different regions. Now, on the flip side of this, yes, enrollment numbers are down, and it's because it's difficult at times to fill these slots. And just an example is that, so I have two daughters. One is, my eldest was in the pre-K program, and in her class for this past year, there were 2 slots in her class that no matter what, they were not able to be filled. And we can see on this last point that 77 children were supported through the child find process. So this really is showing how the early identification by teachers is working and that the support is provided for these children. If we could move on to the next slide, please. Thank you. So here we can see a map of Fairfax County with the high school boundaries and showing where the FCPS pre-K and Early Head Start program locations are, as well as the Community Head Start and VPI centers. We can also see through the color coding the percentages of students entering kindergarten without a preschool experience for the school year of 2020 to 2021. So I don't know how well everybody can see this, but it's also within the annual report. But the darker the shade of blue, the higher the percentage of no preschool experience before entering kindergarten. And I would just like to highlight a few notable changes that there have been regarding the pre-K experience for children entering kindergarten in the autumn of 2020. So we can see, for instance, in the Lewis boundary, there was 20% of students that had no pre-K experience. Now, this was down by 10 percentage points from 38% in 2018. And although 10 percentage points is a sizable decrease, areas such as Lewis or Herndon with 31% and also saw a decrease, and Annandale and Justice with 36% and 26% respectively, continue to be high need areas, even if they have experienced a decrease in the percentage of children entering kindergarten without pre-K experience. Now, on the other side, we have seen areas such as Langley, McLean, and Marshall, which traditionally have high rates of pre-K experience. They have seen a modest increase in the no pre-K experience before entering kindergarten. Now, these percentages still remain relatively low. They're between 12% and 6%. The question is, what accounts for these changes? Now, we know that the pandemic evidently played a role here with preschools closing or families moving out of the county, but there is definitely more research needed to tease out the factors contributing to this state of play. If you have anything to add before I move on to the next slide, otherwise we'll move on to the next slide, please.
I think you captured it very well, Tanya, but thank you.
I think Tanya, unless it's me, is having some connection issues. So we'll wait a minute here. Try to give her a chance to reconnect. There's somebody else who'd like to come.
Yeah, Mara, do you want to
Yeah.
continue as Tanya works to get logged back on?
Sure, I'm happy to continue. Thank you.
Thank you.
So you can see here on this slide, this is really highlighting some of our successes this year. You can see on this slide, the very first large bullet is about the resources that were given to classrooms and to families. Specifically, we were able to provide them with some digital platforms that we haven't been able to give them in the past that Tanya will probably speak to a little bit about her experience with them, but Ready Rosie is a literacy program that really supports families in terms of the interactions around reading. Waterford also has a literacy component as well as a math component. And the ABC Math is for our very youngest early Head Start learners. So we were able to provide those pieces. The other success in terms of virtual resources was our ability to provide asynchronous videos, both as a student resource and as an opportunity for teachers to have professional learning. So they could access information on their time that really helped families in terms of not having to schedule it for a certain time, and teachers as well. And they really use those resources for their planning and for their interactions with families and kids. Similar to the K through 12 and their planning and pacing guides, we did develop some weekly planning guides that teachers could use as a place to start from, or use it completely and lower their stress levels so that they could provide some good quality learning experiences for kids. And then finally, we sent home materials similar to K-12, where families, again, had the resources they needed that the teachers would be able to use, and kids could have the hands-on experiences that we know are so crucial for them to have in terms of their learning. The next big umbrella is our social emotional learning and the trauma and grief support, recognizing that, this year, of course, happened within this pandemic, which really created, particularly for the community that we serve, a lot of real challenges. So we did some professional learning for teachers and for our central office, because we know our central office teams work directly with families as well. And obviously our teachers are working directly with kids. So we really created an opportunity for teachers and central office to feel successful. And then we did give very specific resources, like a grief bag that allowed families who were experiencing loss to have a resource. The teacher could go through it with them. We also have mental health specialists that could walk families through these resources and support them during a time of grief. We also had some social emotional lessons and videos that teachers could use that really taught direct social emotional skills for calming, for dealing with conflict, that really helped children in a very succinct but direct way around building those social emotional learning skills. I see that, Tanya, you are back. Do you want to take over now, or would you like me to continue with this slide? I'll continue, and then Tanya, you jump in when you're ready. So finally, we did have some really clear supports for families. We this year launched virtual eligibility, as everybody did. We had to learn to do support our families to complete the application process online and provide them support for walking through that process. We also did, as you know, that just applying doesn't mean you immediately get a slot, but you also need to be found eligible, and we have to go through enrollment. So all that was done virtually. We also had to find a different way to do our developmental screening. So we did offer developmental screenings virtually whenever possible. And then we also, as Tanya referred to earlier, we did have the family school centers virtually, our parent policy committee virtually, as well as we did have 2 town halls, one in English and one in Spanish, specifically targeted at our pre-K and early Head Start families. And those were all done virtually. And we did see some incredible turnout because the ability to access those meetings became easier because families could log on. We also, when our families were not able to access the food sites that FCPS offered, we did arrange to have home delivery to them for food so that students could continue to learn and not have to be worried about having food in their home. And then finally, we had a wonderful donation from a nonprofit that gave us the ability to give out some gift cards to our families that were struggling from some food insecurity. So you can go to the next slide, and I'll see if Tanya is ready to take over.
Hi, Maura. Okay, I'm so sorry. My internet technical issues always happens when it comes to virtual presentations. So going on to the next slide, the Parent Policy Committee governance structure. We have here an overview of how the structure is. And this year we had a total of 70 parent volunteer representatives. And as Maura alluded to in the previous slide, we have had a really good turnout of participation and volunteering despite the pandemic. And strictly speaking, there should be 2 representatives from each school center, and they would also participate in the family school center meetings, of which there are 4 within the whole academic year. And what the representatives would do is they would share with the rest of the parents at the meeting what was discussed at the last Parent Policy Committee meeting. Now, out of the 70 volunteer representatives, 5 of them are elected to the executive board, and we also have 18 elected as regional representatives. And then there are 5 who are also elected to represent the FCPS program at the Policy Council. So, and we can continue on to the next slide, please. Okay, so here we have a summary of the duties of the Parent Policy Committee representatives. And these include, for instance, attending the virtual meetings and also sharing ideas, making decisions. And I would just like to reiterate that we have had a great turnout. And also this in part has been, as Maura mentioned, it's been through the flexibility of having the meetings virtually, and also through having instantaneous translations in Spanish for all our Spanish-speaking families. And so when it comes to the topics that we have discussed at these meetings, we have had quorum to approve items through voting on whether it's the committee budget or whether it's on end of conference topics. And if I'm not mistaken, this approach of having a hybrid of in-person and virtual attendance is being considered as a possible future model for the committee to really encourage and to maintain high participation amongst all the families and parents. And so as I mentioned, we had the representatives participating in the family school center meetings, and they explain what the last committee meetings are. And also you have families having the opportunity to raise any issue with their family service. And I would just like to take a moment and say, you know, the PreK and Early Head Start governance team really deserves a lot of credit in creating a very welcoming and safe environment virtually. So parents who, I mean, none of us parents know each other when we start participating and volunteering, and so it's very challenging to create this kind of environment, especially being virtual. But they did a fantastic job, and so parents could come together and explore ideas in a very productive manner. If we can move on to the next slide, please. Thank you. So here we have first of the 5 elected executive board members who I was privileged to serve with. And we can also see that 2 of the executive boards also were FCPS representatives to the Policy Council. We had 5 representatives in total, and 2 of them were from the executive board. And just a little bit about my role as chairperson. So it involved chairing the committee meetings and presiding over voting procedures and basically encouraging active participation of the fellow parent representatives in the meetings, whether this was leading by example and asking questions to the governance team about aspects of the program, or giving parents the opportunity and encouraging them during the meeting to give comments or suggestions or to ask questions. And this was both in Spanish, so we had Spanish speaking families doing this, and also obviously English speaking families. And please move on to the final slide. Thank you. So this is just a bit about me. So I was the chairperson this past year for the FCPS Parent Policy Committee, and it was really an honor to have been elected and to have served. And it was really just an opportunity for me to give back to the program, which has done so much for my family. And I'm actually a parent. I had the benefit of having 2 children, one enrolled in the pre-K program and another in the Head Start. I've already seen the whole program as such. Really experience. Our family has very much experienced the whole of the program, and yes, and I'm also a FCPS representative to the Policy Council. So I thank you very much for your time, and without further ado, I believe I'm going to be presenting my testimonial as chairperson and parent representative of the Policy Committee. Okay, so I just want to say good morning again. I think now you can all see me, and I would like to thank you again for support board to the FCPS Pre-K and Head Start program, and for the opportunity to continue speaking this morning on behalf of the program and the parents involved. Now, if you don't mind, I would like to take a moment and indulge and publicly thank a few individuals, notably in my and Early Head Start, and they're Alison Ribeiro and Ms. Robin, and our Family Services Specialist, Marisa Nelson, and all the governance team for their support, and in particular to Mia Lee, who has supported and guided me whilst being chair of the Parent Policy Committee. And they have all in their unique ways had a positive influence on our family life, and we shall forever be indebted to them all. Now, whilst most of this presentation will be specifically about me and my family.
Tanya, this is Dr. Braybrand. I think you're having some audio issues, unfortunately.
Tanya, maybe
Tanya?
turn off your video and just
Yeah.
use your mic, and that might help.
Yes.
You turn off the video.
Oh, should I turn off the video?
Yeah, and that might give you a little more, and you can continue.
Okay, thank you. So whilst I was saying, whilst this presentation is specifically about me and my family, it is in reality a reflection of all families who have been helped by the pre-K and early Head Start program in Fairfax County. And today I would just like to give you an insight into what being a pre-K and early Head Start family, especially during the pandemic, has been like. So I will begin with describing the struggles we have faced as a family, how the FCPS pre-K and early Head Start program has helped our family survive these turbulent times, my participation in the Parent Policy Committee, and I would like to end on highlighting the 4 recommendations presented in the annual report and that Dr. Braybrand referred to at the beginning, and give my take on why they are important. So, how did the pandemic affect us in FCPS, pre-K and early Head Start family? We are a single income household, with my husband earning a monthly salary, as I am legally not allowed to work in the US. As the pandemic and its restrictions continued through 2020, my husband started having delays in salary payments. Then there were delays in the renewal of his contract, and eventually his contract was shortened and his salary was reduced. The job instability and insecurity and reduced income has had a twofold effect on our family life. First is the irrevocable and long-term stress we as parents are experiencing, and the sense of powerlessness of not being able to ameliorate the job and income situation due to our status here in the US. Second is the time and energy we as parents have had to invest in mitigating further job instability, securing assistance to help with rent and utilities payments to avoid the threat of the non-renewal of the lease, food, diapers, children's clothing, toys, and books. Whilst we are so appreciative of any help received, applications for financial assistance are lengthy and emotional draining. Travel is involved when going to food and diaper pantries or to clothing referrals. And I haven't even mentioned the typical responsibilities from home, whether preparing meals, doing laundry, and general tidying up. And I should add that in our particular case, we moved to the US 4 months before the pandemic lockdown started. So we did not have any social network of any family or friends to lean on. To add to this situation, my then 4-year-old, who had left all family and friends behind, was now not allowed to see and play with the new friends she had made since arriving in the US. So I was looking after a 1-year-old and a 4-year-old who, mourning the loss of her routine, her friends, her extended family, was experiencing tantrums on a daily basis during the pandemic lockdown. And my husband, who was working remotely from home, was beginning to experience the job instability and its consequences. In all of this mayhem, can you imagine a parent effectively providing the care and attention their children need and deserve on a daily basis with no respite? It is difficult at best. How did the FCPS pre-K and early Head Start program help my family? Many months later, after noting down the FCPS pre-K and early Head Start information from the public notices board at our local community center, we accepted the pre-K slot offered on a rainy day in May 2020, and it felt like we had won the lottery, and indeed we had. There are so many ways the pre-K and early Head Start program has helped our family that I have broadly divided this into two categories: the tangible and intangible benefits. I'll start with the intangible outcomes we have experienced. During our first virtual meeting with the pre-K teachers in August 2020, that was the first change. Even before formal schooling had started, I can only describe how my daughter, Amelia, she was ecstatic when chatting for the first time with her teachers, who were genuinely interested in hearing all she had to tell them and actively encouraged her to share her stories with them. Amelia's enthusiasm for going to school and learning, albeit virtually at the beginning, was set from that day, and thanks to her dedicated teachers, it has never wavered. The online classes provided her with a routine, opportunities to socialize, and to start new friendships with peers, and engage in activities that were both entertaining and didactic. To sum up, I had a happy child who was keen to learn in preparation for kindergarten. There were equally notable changes when our youngest, Adela, was enrolled for an early Head Start slot in April 2021 and started attending in person. The combination of a formal routine, the zealous enthusiasm and affection with which her teachers received her from day one have translated into Adela looking forward to going to school, a dramatic expansion in her vocabulary. At her 2-year checkup, she was significantly behind in the numbers of words and phrases for her age. She has become more self-confident and is increasingly sociable and independent. When both of them started going to school in person, this immediately opened up mine and my husband's time to exclusively focus on work, virtual networking, studying, and addressing the challenges produced by the job insecurity without the stress and guilt of not attending to the needs of our children. Today, Amelia is learning to read books by herself. She has familiarity with numbers and is grasping concepts such as addition and subtraction. The teachers have also taught her and us parents skills and exercises to manage heightened emotions. The Fcps program has prepared Amelia for her journey through school and for it to be a successful one. In immediate, tangible ways, the Fcps pre-K and early Head Start program has alleviated our finances by providing healthy, nutritious meals for our daughters and diapers in the early Head Start program. Moreover, our family services specialist, Marisa, has been an incredible source for securing children's clothing, indicating food pantries, and providing guidance on financial assistance for rent. It is also with Marisa's help that I was able to secure scholarships so we could afford extracurricular activities such as swimming lessons and summer camp. And Marisa has also been a wonderfully patient sounding board to help me think through challenges we face as a family whilst encouraging the design of new goals and supporting our work towards them. I would like to add that even through virtual lessons, parents were encouraged to volunteer online. And I had the opportunity to read stories aloud to Amelia's class on several occasions, and this was a wonderful way for her classmates to get to know Amelia and her family better, and for us parents to meet her friends and build on these new virtual relationships. Now, I would like to talk about my time on the executive board of the Parent Policy Committee. So I decided to run for the position of chair for the basic reason of wanting to give back to the program, which has done so much for my family and for many others. I was given guidance and support through executive board planning meetings with the governance team led by Mia, and had the opportunity to lead and facilitate the parent policy committee meetings, including the voting procedures by parent representatives on a wide range of topics. These include bylaws and meeting minutes and the budget, and which I've mentioned previously. And it was truly an honor and pure enjoyment to assume the responsibilities of chairperson of the committee. Partnering with the governance team, the aim was always to create a welcoming and accepting environment for all parents wishing to become more involved in their children's program. And I believe this is one of the reasons why we have seen a high attendance that is consistent throughout the academic year, despite the pandemic. Being a parent and chair of the committee was an example of taking ownership of the meetings, so other parents felt included in having a stake in the FCPS pre-K and early Head Start program and its outcomes. This ownership was best reflected in our March meeting, where parent representatives were encouraged to suggest ways on how to improve the FCPS pre-K and early Head Start program. The ideas that came out of the March meeting are those recommendations in the annual report, and we are looking to fund them in the fiscal year 2023. The first recommendation is to consider pre-K classrooms in the elementary school specials classes. This means allowing pre-K students to have additional opportunities within the program. My understanding is that there is a willingness from specials classes teachers to teach pre-K students and engage them early on in the special subjects such as music, art, physical education, library, and STEM and STEAM. However, right now, specials teachers are only assigned to kindergarten and upwards. Can you imagine the impact on a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old being exposed to these new subjects and potentially developing interests or passion, and see where it takes them? The first recommendation has the added value that the pre-K specials classes would allow pre-K teachers to have valuable planning time already integrated into their weekly routine, instead of having to fund planning time substitutes. The infrastructure to carry out this recommendation is already in place, but what is needed is a minimal increase in funding so that pre-K students can be included in special classes that kindergarten to grade 6 students are already accessing. For the second recommendation, this is the age-appropriate play spaces at 17 schools that are still in need. And I know that this recommendation has been requested in the past. And I just would like to remind the board that there are still almost 400 children at over a quarter of all the pre-K and early Head Start school sites that do not have any age-appropriate areas. Now, we all know, especially after a year of the pandemic and staying mostly indoors, how crucial it is for children to routinely have physical exercise in their day and the opportunity to practice both their fine and gross motor skills. If I may tease out slightly more the statistics on this current situation of age-appropriate play areas, 9 of these schools are within high school boundaries where 22% or more children have no pre-K experience before entering kindergarten. This is equivalent to 53% of the 17 schools in question. If we go to the percentage of 16% or more children without pre-K experience before entering kindergarten, the number of schools without an age-appropriate play area rises to 13, or 76% of the 17 schools. These are sobering figures. The third recommendation is to permanently expand the mental health team. There are currently only 3 mental health specialists for the whole FCPS pre-K and early Head Start program. This past year has sadly given rise to a wide scope of trauma and grief, and its effects will continue having an impact on children and their development. It is key that mental health services are strengthened to support children during these critical years of their development. The final recommendation to the board is regarding school bus transportation. There are families unable to accept a pre-K slot because it is not at their base school and there is no transportation available to take them to the pre-K school. We are asking that all pre-K students in FCPS have access to bus transportation so that as many eligible families as possible can accept a pre-K slot. To conclude, I would like to consider the question, what makes the FCPS pre-K and early Head Start program stand out from other early childhood programs? Now, I touched upon this at the beginning of the slide presentation of the annual report, and to basically paraphrase from the annual report, the program, it provides children and families high quality comprehensive services to help them be successful and handle a variety of challenges they may face. So this is high quality comprehensive services, not just for the child, but for their families. And that is what these recommendations are about. These recommendations are about enriching all pre-K pupils' school experiences, both inside and outside the classroom, expanding access to pre-K slots to all eligible families, wherever they may live in Fairfax County, and ensuring support to those pre-K students who are at their most vulnerable. During these particularly challenging times, we need the school board to be front and center when it comes to preparing our youngest children and their families for success. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. Thank you for this report, Tanya, and especially thank you for your testimonial and your personal experience. It's so helpful for this board. Just a couple of housekeeping things. We are scheduled to have this conversation until 1 p.m. and we have a 30-minute lunch break. And then we have a long afternoon of return to school. So I know there are many questions and comments. We will begin with our 3 minutes. And if we run over, we will have a decision to make at 1 p.m. So I want everybody to get everything they need to say and ask out there. And if we need to go over, we will make a board decision. So with that, Dr. Anderson, your hand was up and then it went down. Are you?
My hand should be up. I'm sorry. I don't know why it went down. I didn't take it.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I apologize for that confusion. Thank you so much, Ms. Burke, for sharing your personal experiences. We really appreciate you providing that context, and it really underscores how much work we have to do in this area. So thank you. And relating to the recommendations that are before us in the report on page 11, I don't think I have a full enough understanding of the budgeting for this program. I see that, I think on page 2, that part of the funding comes from FCPS, part from Title I, or in part from VPI. And I don't see how that is, I didn't see how that shows up in the annual report. That's part of the report here, the budget report. So can somebody from staff kind of speak to us a little bit in terms of what are the allocations in terms of percentage to this program from FCPS's operating fund?
Thank you, Dr. Anderson. This is Mara Burke. I will have to get you the exact percentage, but the school board does put in the majority of the budget for this program. I can get you the exact percentage. Part of that is required because both of the federal and the state grants that we get do require a match from the locality. We also do receive county funds, but if you're looking for percentages, again, I can get you the exact percentages. The school board does give us the largest percentage for this budget.
Okay, thank you so much. And I so apologize, Tanya, thank you for sharing your personal story. Going to the recommendations that you provided, and Ms. Burke, I look forward to having that additional information because I think it's going to help to construct how we respond to these recommendations. So we have students who do not have access to pre-K programs because of lack of transportation. Is that, or has that contributed to the decline that we have seen this year, that 17% decline over the last year? Have you made any assessments as to how much the transportation piece has impacted this year's decline?
So Dr. Anderson, we will continue to look at that, but we can tell you historically, what we do see is there's these outliers of students who live in communities that currently do not have a program to which transportation can bus them to. So if they don't live within the school boundaries, we look outside that, but there is a limit to that. I can tell you that our colleagues in transportation work extremely hard to try to make it work, but we do find that we always have a percentage of kids who will not get access to our program because they do not have transportation to get there.
So this would be a good time for maybe Mr. Plattenberg to speak to what would this look like for us to support this recommendation to ensure that all of the students who are eligible can have transportation. I don't know if this is a next step. I don't want to necessarily put you on the spot, but can we get some additional information in terms of how that could be addressed?
Well, I can say, I'm sorry, I was having connectivity issues with my camera, but I can say that, you know, we are taking a look at it. I don't know what the true impact would be because in a lot of cases, we are able to provide that transportation as Ms. Burke had mentioned. Our transportation folks have been pretty amazing. But I have reached out to Ms. Furby to try to get a deeper understanding of where the limitations were and what our potential workarounds would be. The only challenge I can say that we've been facing with everything else is the challenge with the national shortage of bus drivers and the impact of the pandemic. But other than that, we are working on it. I'm sorry I don't have a better answer for everybody on this in this conversation, but that's what I have right now.
And I'm happy to add that as a next step for a more comprehensive response. Going back to Ms. Burke, I know we talked about this back in April when we had a conversation in terms of where kids are and what is the enrollment. Can you speak to some of the efforts that are taking place to ensure that we are addressing the decline that took place this year?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Anderson, for bringing that up. As you and I spoke to earlier this year, as well as Ms. Daranack Koufax and Ms. Corbett Sanders, I spoke to them both about the decline in our enrollment and what we were doing to try to get the word out, similar to what we're doing K through 12. So we have done some real targeted work in communities, working with parent liaisons. We're beginning to work with some faith communities, as well as businesses in the community that we know, the community that we serve often accesses, for example, laundromats, things like that. But we've also done some work with our partners from nonprofits, the county web of organizations that they work with. So we've really done some very intentional work with them about getting the word out. We also, as I said, the parent liaisons proved to be invaluable to us in terms of getting that word out. We've also worked specifically with schools in terms of how they are communicating with potential families that are in their community and how they can share this information. We also developed a video that is in English and Spanish that talks about what the program is and how they can apply to it. So we are doing some very concerted efforts to target particularly communities that we are seeing that we've traditionally had struggled with to fill those spaces. And I think the last piece that I think it's really important is that we've worked with Jeff's team and Jeff Plattenberg's team in terms of looking how the county is evolving and redeveloping, because we know as that happens, sometimes our communities change and shift. So we work with Jeff's team to project of where we potentially see that there might be changes in the communities that we are currently serving, and where we can project to possibly move a classroom or add a classroom to better serve the greater Fairfax community.
Thank you very much for that comprehensive answer. My next question is regarding the second recommendation for appropriate outdoor play spaces. You mentioned in the report here that grant programming will not allow you to meet this goal. What dollar amounts are we speaking about here? And if you don't have that, I can add that for a next step.
So a playground, just looking at, so we, like if we install a playground, that, you know, those are very expensive. So they run about $125,000 to $150,000 to place a playground at any of these locations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Omesh?
Thank you. Thank you to our presenters today. It's really one of, it's a key program that we run, and I'm really thrilled to be able to discuss this today. Just following, actually, one of the points I wanted to ask about was whether we've considered working through the foundation or kind of public-private partnerships in terms of sponsoring something like these playgrounds and play spaces. What have we done on that front? Have we considered that?
Ms. Omesh, we have not. I think that's a really good idea that we could work with Mrs. Murphy to see if there are some grant opportunities to build some of these playgrounds.
Yeah, I'd imagine there are plenty of companies who'd love to have their name on a playground or something like that. But in any case, working through the foundation, specifically on that piece, I think could be doable. The other thing I was going to say, I appreciated the recommendations, especially on the mental health professionals and allocating funding for that. And then, of course, transportation access. And I would love to hear from staff about how we're going to move forward on some of those pieces. I'll come back to that, but I wanted to also ask about how this is initially advertised to families. You mentioned we're trying to expand some of that. If you could address that, please. And then also the cutoff, whether that's the usual FRM cutoff that we're used to, or if it's a lower threshold.
So those are really good questions. And we have found that we do a lot of advertisement, as I've shared, through a lot of different resources, whether that's paper. We've worked with the county and they've put things up at bus stops. But we also know that our families are our best advocates. And so many of our families will share information. We've asked them, we give them information to turn around and share, and it's a grassroots event, because we know that the community, again, we serve are often can be, not always, but can be our most hard to reach families. So really getting into the community, to those trusted community members, like through Opportunity Neighborhoods, the ambassadors, and really leveraging the trust relationships that people have, whether it's the parent liaisons or the community ambassadors, to begin to share information about the program. I think as Mrs. Blackburn shared, that once families connect with us, we do a very good job building that relationship and helping them through the process and guiding them through that process. But you do bring up a really good point. That initial understanding and knowledge that this program exists and is available to them is really important. So we really do try to look at more unconventional ways, but also using conventional ways to share information about the program. And I've forgotten your second question. I apologize.
The threshold for who's eligible.
Yeah, so, oh, my phone is talking to me. Sorry about that. I apologize. So the threshold varies depending on the grant. So the threshold for Head Start, the income is much lower. It's the federal poverty level. The Virginia Preschool Initiative gives us a little bit more. Families can make a little bit more than the federal poverty level. And the other piece that the VPI allows, if a child has an identified delay through an IEP, that family can make even more. The additional piece about the Virginia Preschool Initiative, they also give you an opportunity to identify local criteria that will allow you, again, to go to that higher threshold of income. But again, none of that income is bringing in families who wouldn't be in need or wouldn't be able to access a private pre-K because of their limited funds. So there is still this threshold that the families in need would only be accessing this program.
Yeah, because if I'm reading this correctly, I mean, the program is just, max a couple $1 million, right? Is that correct, Ms. Burke? Just looking at.
I'm sorry, to run the program, you mean? How much is it? Or how much do we need? I'm confused.
No, not what you need. Sorry, the budget for the program. I mean, just looking at the annual report and the expenses.
No, so our budget is actually quite larger than that. It's I think it's 28, a little less than 28 million is our overall budget. And the majority of that goes to pay for the teachers. So the grant pays for all of our teaching teams. So the instructional assistant and the teachers that are in the classroom. So the majority of that budget really pays for them.
Okay, that's helpful. I was reviewing what was shared with us in the annual report. But I will say, I mean, I think that what I'm trying to suggest here is that both from an outreach perspective and the cutoff, there is so much potential for many, many more families to be served by this program. And it's just a function of maybe not having access, reach these families, or having such a low threshold that there are plenty of people with need that could benefit from this that we're not including. And so, even considering things like language access, right? Or like how we communicate, whether that's all in English or not, et cetera. So I'd love to see some robust thinking around that. And I'm going to follow up with you guys to kind of see how we can expand that. I did want to also ask about page 13. I wanted to hear, this is a really key piece. Obviously, we all know that early childhood education is one of the key factors, determinants of success, all the way through K through 12. And so just looking at that, I wanted to kind of hear an analysis just preliminarily here from Dr. Presidio and Dr. Williams. Dr. Williams, maybe you can start us off from an equity perspective of what this speaks to here, because I find this to be an incredibly damning image, really, just to meditate on the numbers and focus on that for a second.
Good afternoon, everyone. Yep. So I think what that chart represents is what we all know, right? Is that there is not equitable access distributed across our organization. And unfortunately, irrespective of what aspect of function you look at, you see very similar patterns of who has access and who doesn't. That's actually the reason for taking a division-wide look at this issue, because when we look at the relevant data, we see pretty consistent patterns. So I think, even in the information that we could still glean, right, which is relative to some of those questions you just asked, we still see those patterns. So that would be my high-level analysis of what that graph shows.
Dr. Presidio, is there anything you wanted to add to that?
I wouldn't add too much. I mean, I think Dr. Williams, obviously touched on the most important point. We started putting together that geographic map of Fairfax County in terms of access about 5 years ago, so that the community and the board would have an understanding of where some of the underserved areas in our community were, and we could track it and monitor that. And we haven't really been able to address some of those access and opportunity gaps over the last several years. And since there's not universal pre-K in Virginia, it's a real challenge. And, as Ms. Burke said, we're relying a lot on, of course, state funds, but local funds to be able to bridge those gaps. And, that's been one of the biggest challenges. We do partner with the county. Preschool and early childhood education is one of the focus areas for SCIP, the Successful Youth and Policy Team that has county staff and school division staff. But there's a lot more access, that we would like to be able to provide to students. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's just particularly, it stands out that this is consistent with a lot of other conversations that we end up having, right, about disparity and equity and what's going on across the county. So I really appreciate that piece. And moving from there, I understand that obviously this is a massive undertaking to have pre-K education. And that's something that's going to require massive county funding to begin with. And I know this is a conversation that started way longer than I ever, than me getting here. But with that note, I'll end with a question to Dr. Brabrand. Can we put in place a proposal to the county over the course of years? It could be, however long it takes for us to get to a place where we're actually capturing the needs that are so obvious from this map and this entire report.
Yeah, absolutely. And I believe we've done some of that work before, and the price tag is very high. The good news is we have heard President Biden talk about an education plan that tremendously extends the federal government's support for pre-K education. And we're looking for details that could be a shot in the arm to help us. And I think there is a moment here, Ms. Omesh, with federal and state support to really see universal pre-K happen. So I think it's the beginning of a conversation today that we're putting down in this annual report that we can follow up with our state and local legislators and see if we can really marshal resources, both facility resources and instructional resources. It's not just hiring the people, it's creating the facilities to support all these additional kids. But absolutely, we can have that conversation. I am hopeful that there is more promising news ahead at the state and federal level to help us. As Ms. Burke said, most of this is locally funded and locally paid, and we need millions more to do it the right way.
Yeah, my time is up, but I hope that in our next budget conversation, we can look
follow
at
up. Yeah, and we will as we get some additional information from the federal government around this proposal.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Brabrand. And I did want to pinpoint what Dr. Presidio said about SCIP and the joint work. I can speak to that later, and Ms. McLaughlin may also. Ms. Marin?
Yeah, thank you. I've really enjoyed focusing on early childhood for a change. And I believe that we don't focus on it because as we're talking about, the money isn't there. And there's finite funding and our system focuses on K-12. And that's okay, but it's also very limited. But the reality is that we just need so much more funding. And this is just a 20-year-old narrative that I've personally been part of. So for me, I'm coming at this as, look, we are doing the best we can to fulfill our mission, and the state and the federal government have not held up their part of the bargain for, again, at least 20 years that I've personally seen. So I've already submitted as budget questions the recommendations that the policy committee has put forth. I submitted them last night. So we will have those forthcoming so we can know. Now, there are going to be recommendations that we're not going to be able to fulfill unless we drastically change other priorities. So what do? It's go back to our legislative agenda. Maybe President Biden's got some stuff going, but until we fundamentally change the narrative and thinking in our community about what quality education is, we're going to be having this conversation and just trying to siphon money from one place to another. One thing I want to say is there was one item in the report that says, the vision for pre-K early Head Start is every child ready to learn. And I challenge that because they already are learning. They are learning in early childhood. We're not preparing them for school. We are educating them because that's the best way to raise kids. And, whether it's through formal pre-K or something else, children need to be educated. So I just want to change that frame of reference. It's not we're getting them into K and then getting them to third grade so they get that, where reading is supposed to take hold. But again, related to our forum topic, those gains that are made, and this is proven in Head Start research, the gains that are made through programs like Head Start will only remain if they are met in third grade with continued quality education. So otherwise, we are just throwing our money out the window. I also want to really, push back on the school nutrition program. I had a doctor yesterday write everything that I think that some of us have been talking about, the amount of refined sugar, the grains, the dairy. I know we've heard from other students about the lack of, nutritious choices. I mean, we just can't keep giving kids who are hungry foods that won't fuel their minds and bodies. So, that's something that I would love to, can our nutrition director, what can we do within the USDA program and other funds to make a difference there? But for me, colleagues, fundamentally, this is a budget issue, and we are very constrained. So I'm not giving up by any means, but until we can make a better case to the public, or if the money comes from the federal government, I don't see us doing a lot more differently, unfortunately. The last thing I just want to mention is, what was the planning time, and this gets and other parts about ensuring our early elementary school teachers and ES teachers have planning time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Marin. Ms. Corbett-Sanders.
Yes, thank you. And I first want to thank Ms. Blackburn for your incredible testimonial. And we are honored that you have chosen our community to locate in. We're just so blessed by people like you bringing your family to us. So thank you. I have a couple of questions. I also have a suggestion for a next step. Following on Ms. Marin's comments regarding legislative advocacy, I would suggest that we need to have a full court press, that we change the legislative requirements in the state of Virginia from a K through 12 to a pre-K through 12 system. And that will address some of our funding needs if we can actually get that initiative behind us. Secondly, I would urge that we relook at some of the data that was shared with the previous board regarding the local programs that address some of the needs for students who are not able to access our pre-K, and the training that we do with those local providers, and whether or not that training actually is consistent with what we want to do for our early literacy and structured literacy that we just talked about an hour ago. So that would be another next step, please. And then finally, when we talk about the physical infrastructure, we are in a unique situation this year. We know that there are funds available under ESSER for actual infrastructure. And perhaps this is an area that we link the infrastructure investment in those playgrounds to the social emotional learning for our early students, because we do know that the more that our kids are outside and learn how to play together on structures such as what's available in our pre-K programming, we know that they gain essential skills, not only teamwork skills, but also social emotional skills. So I would suggest that that be built in. I do support the Mental Health Expo, but as we've spoken, we are expanding that team, but we need to have real numbers on how to do that. And then finally, when we look at this hot map, I think the hot map actually demonstrates a couple things. It demonstrates also how our boundaries really need to be addressed, because when you have some of these boundaries that are very elongated, and then others that are very tight, it does have different outcomes. And it also impacts the the makeup of our areas. So I would urge that we are planning on having that conversation. And when we talk about that conversation, we need to talk about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Corbett-Sanders. Ms. McLaughlin.
Yes, thank you. Ms. Pekarski, I don't want to steal your thunder on Skipped, but I do want to just ask Superintendent Braybrand or Dr. Presidio or Ms. Burke, as a founding member of Skipped, this is one of our it was the founding reason for creating the successful Children Youth Policy Team, was to address early childhood and pre-K. So I guess what I would ask is, when this advisory committee, which as the superintendent noted, it's his advisory committee, not the school board's, what was the crosswalk at the beginning of the year with this group to let them know what the county board of supervisors, the school board, the two county entities were they briefed on the fact that this is a key focal point of the skipped work, and how that would then intersect with their recommendations here today?
If you want, Dr. Braybrand, I can speak to that a little bit.
Absolutely.
Okay. So thank you for that question, Mrs. McLaughlin. Yes, we do share how the county and the school board support us. We could do a better job of labeling those different committees that are doing that to help families understand. But I also think it's important to contextualize our policy committee, and that many of our families are brand new to the school system. So orienting them to the school system and the program itself is the priority initially. And then as we move through, and maybe Tanya can speak to this if she feels comfortable, how we share with them what the county is doing, what the school system is doing to continue to support our program. But I would agree we could do a better job in contextualizing that within the committees and be more specific with the families.
Yeah, so I guess, Ms. Blackburn, were you aware that there is a whole joint committee between the county government and the school system through the two elected bodies of the boards that we're targeting specific work to expand early childhood education and dealing with just access and opportunity and facility challenges, or is this new to you today?
Oh, thank you, Ms. McLaughlin. No, it's new for me. It's been a very, very steep learning curve because I am not I'm not from the US, and I think for many of the families many of the parents on the executive board, it really has just been this particular year has just been very challenging in terms of grappling with all this new information about a new school system, a new county system, compared to where we have come from. So this information, I'm sure the governance team at the Pre-K and Early Head Start would have been very happy to share this information with the executive board, but it's not something that I was personally aware of.
Sure, no worries at all. I know we're limited in the work session. But Dr. Braybrand, I would just say, since this is your advisory committee, I strongly encourage in the future that, in order for their work to be meaningful to your team and to the board, I think we really need to make sure they are given a full and comprehensive briefing on the skipped work to date, because you don't want them to be necessarily recreating the wheel.
Reinventing the wheel. Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Great point. Great point.
Yep. The other thing too that I think is really contextual to this conversation today, again, is who can answer how much money we receive locally in our funding from the Board of Supervisors specific to our pre-K and early childhood education programming offerings, and has that grown over time as the program has grown? Is it calculated into their overall per pupil funding? I think that goes to some really important points that Ms. Marin and others have brought about the budget challenges, and I think it'd be important to have that clarity. Are we getting funded for this already, or because it certainly has been something in the last 10 years where, like full day kindergarten, we're trying to move toward more universal pre-K.
Let me see if Maura knows that information. Otherwise, we can take it as a budget question and follow back up with the details. But Maura, do we have that information off the top?
I don't have the exact numbers, but I think we've shared this in other forums that any increase in money has come from the school board, a slight increase over the years. And we have also seen a little bit of an increase in the per pupil at the state level.
So is our CFO, Lee Burden, not on today's work session?
I don't know off the top of my head. I don't know that we have Lee here for this. I'd have to look through the Zoom here.
Okay.
For a second.
I would say to my colleagues, I think this is an absolute essential next step for the superintendent provide following this work session portion. I mean, we need to know what exactly did the Board of Supervisors fund us, if at all, how much, what's it grown over the last decade? And because I agree with Ms. Marin and others, absolutely lobbying at the state level. Love what Ms. Corbett Sanders said about making it, our new mission is pre-K to 12. But I do think that we've got to know our numbers. We've got to know what funding we're getting. The county has been great partners, but the details like how much money we're actually getting will matter for our work. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McLaughlin. Ms. Cohen?
I'm so glad to get to piggyback on that. Definitely, this has also been a conversation with the joint CIP committee, because we are talking about facilities too. And I know many of you wind up in the same spot that we're in the Springfield district, where the vast majority of our schools are overcrowded. And so the idea of trying to take on any new programs from a facilities standpoint becomes kind of the end game. And that's definitely not what we want to happen. So to that end, some of the conversations that we've been able to have with Supervisor Faust and Supervisor Smith have been around pre-K facilities, and in particular co-location. So things like using rec centers, maybe where in areas where schools are overcrowded, things like potentially looking at office building or different facilities that the county already owns. Because Ms. McLaughlin, to your point, they're getting, there's a chunk of money that they have set aside. I really want to tell you it's 25 million, but I could be wrong, so I don't want to overspeak, but directly for pre-K. So we want to figure out, to your point, we don't want to leave anything on the table. And to Ms. Blackburn's point, we don't want to leave any kids out there when there's room in other places and trying to figure that out. So creative solutions, totally hear you. Two questions though I had, well, one is just to push it out there, but in going to the foundation, I think that's a wonderful idea, but also don't forget to circle back to Jay Garant and see, what's happening. He's the person at FCPS who more often is dealing with tangible things that are given to us from corporations. And so that intersection is not always clear of who kind of what. So make sure that you ping both of them, which you probably already know. The other is just also getting creative about transportation. We talked about the limits definitely and struggling with this national bus driver shortage, which I think is going to be critical in all areas of trying to get kids to different places that they need to be. So my question would be, what opportunities do we have to work with county transportation? And also maybe partnering with, Metro. I know Metro has a Metro van that gets some of our residents who have disabilities to different places to make sure that they can access jobs and all kinds of different transportation needs that they have. So is there an opportunity for a partnership there to potentially get some kids into spaces where we have openings, but not transportation? So those are the only things I wanted to add. I appreciate everybody's comments and completely agree that this is an area of focus that we need to take up the mantle on, but also aware of all of the roadblocks that we have. So trying to work together with the county and maybe the state a little bit more in figuring out some of these things that have been roadblocks for us, since there's, real kids at the end of every one of those roadblocks. So I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Cohen. Ms. Sizemore-Heiser?
Oh, thank you. Sorry, my mic wasn't, I don't know why my camera looks so weird, but anyway, I appreciate, thank you. I want to piggyback off of what Ms. Cohen said, and it's just kind of related but unrelated. I wanted to sort of put out there that we keep talking about shortages, bus driver shortages, IA shortages, sub shortages, and yet we have a disability unemployment rate of 71%. We have a Davis and Pulley and STEP Career Center programs that I think we should really partner with within our schools to provide some of these chances for some of those students to gain work skills in some of our critical needs areas. that could then lead to work paths. But Davis Pulley and STEP often partner with Marriott and CVS and the airport. But where is the partnership with both our schools and our county to help create that pipeline for some of these critical need shortages? So that's a side note that's not really related to this, but I think is important as we're trying to build up a pre-K program. We're going to have greater needs for subs and greater shortages. And if we start building that pipeline now, I think it'd be very helpful. So I would urge Dr. Boyd, Dr. Presidio to really consider how we're using those programs and how we're partnering with those work programs, and even with the EFE classes and WAT classes that are in the schools. How are we giving our own resources and areas for that partnership in critical needs areas? So that's the first thing I wanted to say. I fully agree with Ms. Omesh in looking at public-private partnerships. I think this goes, again, beyond pre-K to a lot of our programs where there's specific discrete needs. How do we partner with the foundation and OCCR community relations to identify these discrete needs like playgrounds or other things, and then work with our private partnerships to help fund these discrete needs? I think that's a really an area of opportunity that we have in our schools to build some of that. I am wondering, in terms of when we talk about the trauma-informed mental health needs for pre-K, if especially in relation to COVID, if there's space to use some of our ESSER funds. No, that's short term, but to fund additional supports, at least in the next year or two as we're coming out. So I'll pause there and ask that question. If you want to comment on anything else I've said, that would be great too.
Laura, do you want to give your subject matter expertise about that, especially as we're finishing up our ESSER 3 package? Do you want to make some comments?
Yes, we did. We did put in for an additional mental health specialist in the ESSER funds. So we are hopeful that can be funded through the ESSER funds or through some funding through ISD. So we are hopeful to be able to enjoy having an additional person on board next year. But again, that money would be temporary. So we do have to look at a more permanent path. But I do appreciate you bringing it up. That has been discussed, and it is it was submitted as a possibility for the ESSER funds.
Okay, and I agree. I think we need to really, I love what Ms. Corbett-Sanders said about the pre-K through 12 mission, and we really need to push for state and federal funding. But in the meantime, because that has been I think a repetitive conversation, right? For 20, 30 years, we've been saying we need to push for more state and federal funding for pre-K. In the meantime, again, how can we leverage what we have, whether it's the collaboration with the Board of Supervisors and the joint space usage, whether it's our programs where we have a ready built pipeline, we have teachers for tomorrow, why aren't we tapping into our disability population for some of these other needs? Or whether we can leverage our corporations locally to help fund some of these discrete needs. I'd really urge us to use OCCR, the community relations piece of OCCR, with our foundation. So I agree with much of what everyone else has said, so I'm not going to repeat all of that, but that's the piece I wanted to add to those. And I just wanted to thank Maura and for sharing your stories. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dernakofa.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Burke, and thank you, Ms. Blackburn, for presenting, and Ms. Blackburn for sharing your personal experience. Maura, you know what a big fan I am of yours and the programming that you do, but I am perennially frustrated when I hear this. Just, Maura, I have an email from you, and you guys have been doing a great job, so much so that my colleagues, I need you to know that at the end of 2019, Fairfax County alone, we added 657 new slots, more children served. At the same time, the county's rate was not growing as much. And Ms. Burke, I would love for you to work with Ms. Toohey to understand what the county is providing. Ms. Corbett-Sanders, you know, you and I have been working on this a long time. I'm a bit frightened of having us being labeled a pre-K through 12 system, because I don't want us to have an unfunded mandate on our hands. We know we have been working a very long time. Skip, Ms. McLaughlin, you know, has come about as a result of trying to get this pre-K messaging done. We have been working on this since the Obama administration. I think if my memory serves me, and I have a Washington Post article here from later, we get somewhere between 6,000 and 7,000 per child to fund in the BPI, and it costs triple. No, not anymore. What is that, Maura?
So we get half of that. So the state, so they give us a little over $3,000. Our match has to be a minimum of that, of the same amount, but it costs the same amount as it does K-12 to for our pre-K students. It's more for our early Head Start students. So the per pupil is about the same for K-12 as it is for a pre-K student.
And so what is so tell me what the actual cost is, since I wasn't remembering the match correctly. What is the actual cost per Head Start student or VPI student that Fairfax has to put in?
So it's about, I can give you the exact numbers, but it for our younger kids, it's about close to $20,000 for our infants and toddlers, which isn't that unusual. And then for our younger kids, it hovers around $12,000 to $13,000, maybe a little bit more than that. I'll have to go back and look. With the salary of increase of teachers, I have to double check on that.
So that is a significant amount of funding that we have already been contributing from, our own funds. So in essence, we are already doing that. We are already that pre-K through 12 system, but we are not. As Ms. Marin said, this is a problem. Universal pre-K has been on the horizon. It was on the horizon in the grasp when Senator Warner was the governor, and then nothing else happened. There's been lots of interest, but there has never been that initiative to invest in this, neither by the state nor the county. And the county was committed to doing this with the start of the skipped programming. So we are where we are. And I think too, if I didn't already say this was an anomaly this year, right, Ms. Berg? We normally have a waiting list for our students, and the fact that we had vacancies. I'm correct in that?
Yes, we've never had this much of a vacancy. We always fill. The state, as you may recall, 2 years ago had put in a deadline to receive funding. So that has put a little bit of conditions on our ability to ensure that we consistently are fully enrolled, because we now have a deadline of September 30th to receive full funding. And as you can imagine, again, the community we serve and the hoops we expect them to jump through in order to be found eligible. And again, Tanya might be able to speak to this, is incredible, and they do it, but they don't always do it in the timely manner to meet our bureaucratic requirements.
Right, and I think it's important that, and Tanya, I would like you to speak to that, if you don't mind. You said it was a steep learning curve. Can you expound upon that a little bit for us?
Hi, thank you so much. So when I say a steep learning curve, I mean just coming to the US and trying to learn about and navigating the whole school system. So just a bit of background, we are a multilingual family. We speak Spanish and English. And when we found out about the pre-K program, it was actually easier for us to apply in Spanish because we had all the documentation in Spanish. And I think that perhaps for a lot of family who are in high need areas, their first language is not English. So it really, really helps to have the information or to have the advertising in Spanish, or possibly even in another language that isn't English. And to be honest, during the application process, so we submitted the application online, and then we were paired with a family services partner, Carolina in this case. And what really, really helped was that we were able to, this was before the pandemic started, but we actually had an appointment, an in-person appointment with her, and she went through the whole process, explained to us, and basically took us by the hand and said, okay, this is what you need to do. This is what you need to say, because we were coming from Chile, and in Chile at the moment, there is a lot of social unrest. It's not a particularly safe place at the moment. And so we were just giving her our specific story, our unique background. And she was saying, okay, well, these are the items that you would really need to put down on your application, which we didn't think would really matter or would be relevant. And but she basically guided us through it and made sure that we completed the application and submitted it. And then obviously the central office staff would then review the application and see if we would be eligible or not. And just having that one person to contact, to follow up on, it really makes a difference, because you're in a country where you really do not know a person. We don't know anybody when we first arrived. So it really, really helped.
Well, thank you. And that puts into light with a very personal perspective what Ms. Burke was talking about, the red tape, as we call it here, you know, the bureaucracy that you have to navigate, particularly when you're with in such needs. So yeah, just wrapping up, I thank Ms. Marin for asking those questions in advance. I'd like to know the numbers that are attached to all the recommendations as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nekofax. I think I'm the only one, and I left to speak. I don't see any other hands up. Thank you again for this presentation and the personal narrative. I think many good points have been raised. I will tell you, while serving on the SCIP and hearing from, you know, the county's, you know, counterparts working on early childhood and listening to what is happening in FCPS, there is just so much, and it's everywhere. And I will be honest, I am still trying to wrap my brain around who does what, where does the money come from, who owns this, who owns that. And I'm still learning. So to Ms. McLaughlin's point, especially when it comes to the budgetary piece of that, it would be so very helpful to get that information. That map was extremely helpful to me in the presentation for two reasons. Really, I think as Ms. Omesh brought up, for the opportunity gaps that exist when it comes to program access. Wow, that map really, really, I think, has a story to tell. And it's interesting to me as a representative from the western part of the county to really see that, and to also see the need that we have really across the county and in my own region, and where those programs are placed, and how many kids we have going into kindergarten who don't have those experiences. So to kind of, you know, look at that and then look at what we are doing as a school system, especially when those kids come to kindergarten, and what resources we have to help fill in some of those gaps for the experiences. You know, that's interesting to me going forward. But also this transportation need, I really want to highlight that we're now hearing this common thread in many different areas, you know, in early childhood. I've heard it now from our alternative high school in, you know, in Centerville. Middle school start times, transportation is a huge barrier. I really think we have a much larger issue at hand in this system. And I think it's been highlighted, but I think we do. And at some point, I hope this board will really take a look at that and our transportation as a whole, and really see if there's some different things we need to be doing or some budgetary implications. So I just really wanted to put a point to that. And I think my colleagues have raised many of other great points. So I see one more hand, Ms. Derna Kofax, would you? No, okay. The time is exactly 1 o'clock. I wanna thank our presenters again. And we are supposed to have a 30-minute break between now and our next part of this work session. Dr. Brabrand, oh, Ms. Corbett Sanders, I do see your hand now.
I just have a quick point of order. Has somebody recorded all of the next steps that people have expressed?
Good question, Ms. Mulberg.
And if not, if somebody could review the tape and list them all down, that would be great.
The process was changed quite a while ago where the board members record their own next steps, and the link was sent to all of you by email. We'll resend the link.
So
great, thank you.
If everybody can take a look at that and put those next steps on there, and we will coordinate with Dr. Anderson to let you know when that will close down. I think usually we're about 24 hours post our work session. Dr. Brabrand, do you have any closing comments or staff?
No, thanks. It was a great discussion. It has been a long running issue. Funding is the issue. The lion's share of it has been local. We need our state and federal governments to come forward and say this is a crucial priority. And if we're going to come out of this pandemic with an equity focus, we need to have an equity focus at pre-K. And I'm hopeful that we'll be able to move the needle with our state and federal folks. We have a lot of funds for the first time, and they need to be invested sustainably in pre-K. We'll continue to work on it with you all and with our community. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. McLaughlin, did your hand just go up? You stand between us and lunch. Go.
I know. I want to capture something that Dr. Brabrand just said. And it was really kind of discussed here about the mental health staff are needed, and Ms. Burke mentioned for using ESSER funds. Dr. Brabrand, at a macro level, I do want to plant the seed in your head that we are very mindful that ESSER funds are not going to be sustaining. They are short term. And the point is that the federal government's giving us money saying to emerge from and repair from the pandemic. So I really hope you'll be very clear with our board. We need to be clear with one another and with employees. If we're hiring to repair from COVID, we can't be suddenly adding in more and more employees to the payroll that we'll then need to figure out how we're going to pay for them when maybe in fact that isn't what they're being brought on board to do, which is there's short-term needs, but then there's the long-term impact. And I'm not saying that some positions we add with ESSER aren't things we want to invest in and continue going forward, but it did spark a red flag in my mind that we're going to need to be really clear. If we don't get money, we can't keep carrying more people on a payroll that we don't have funds coming in for.
Yeah, and I'll summarize it this way. We have ESSER 3 right now. It's temporary, it's COVID and pandemic related, and President Biden is talking about an education plan for this coming budget, federal budget, that would expand K-12 with additional pre-K funding. So we'll have to keep track of that, and we'll certainly bring those updates to the board when we have them.
Correct, but our ESSER funding is K-12, so it's for all K-12 that you're talking about adding new positions.
That's right. That's right. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. McLaughlin, for the clarification. We will see everybody at 1:30, and Ms. Tolan will be leading the next portion. Thank you.
Thank you.